Guys, which one are you on?
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, thank you for those of you that finished before we were going over that for waiting patiently so that you didn't disrupt others that are working still. I want you to turn back to page 195 because we started on page 195 and I want to go over those two problems before we move on so that you can check and see how you did on page 195 for those of you that are working so diligently. The first, we did 1/2 plus 1/4. And we are using fraction bars, fraction strips, fractions, whatever you want to call them, pieces, however, to do this. And since we're doing the problems on 195, it'll be best for you to follow along by looking at the page 195. Because I want to review that part first, because that's what we started with on Friday. And in the picture, it gives you the problem. 1, you have to put the 1 up there, just like it shows you in the picture what to do in the picture. And since our problem is 1/2 plus 1/4, we find our half and we find our 4th. Now looking at this, Jake, is my answer, my sum here, going to be less than or greater than 1?
Yes.
Less, because these two together don't equal 1. They're less than 1. They're that much less than 1, whatever the value of that space is. So now, as the instructions say, let me look on somebody's book so that I can make sure I can read this. Because the beauty of this book is it tells you exactly what to do. Find 1/2 plus 1/4. Place a 1/2 strip and a 1/4 strip under the whole strip on your math board. So 1/2, we've done that. Find fraction strips, all with the same denominator, that are equivalent to 1/2 and 1/4. And fit exactly under the sum, 1/2 and 1/4. Record the addends using equal denominators. So we need to take one of these pieces here. One of these denominators, not one of the pieces. So we're taking one of these denominators here, and we have denominators of 2, 3, 4, do we have 5? 5, 6, 8, 10, 12, I don't know, a whole bunch of different ones. But we have to find using the same denominator. So if I say I'm going to use 1/3, I got to see if 1/3 will fit exactly under 1/2, and boom shakalaka, it doesn't. So I need to find pieces that have the same denominator that are going to fit underneath 1/2 and underneath 1/4. So Audrina,
Yes.
what do you think that piece would be? 4ths. Let's check and see. All right, so we have 1/2, and it fits exactly. So on those lines where you're going to write you're going to write 1/2 equals 2/4, and then you're going to see how many 4ths hit under exactly 1/4. And let's see how many 4ths would fit under this. Oh, that's easy. 1/4 fits under 1/4. So now I have 2/4 plus 1/4. Because I'm finding the equivalent pieces that will fit underneath both 1/4 and 1/2. So the 4ths are the only way to do this. So now I'm changing and I'm saying 1/2 is equal to 2/4. 1/2 is equal to 2/4. You're using your fraction pieces so you can prove that. I am saying 1/4 is equal to 1/4. Now that's going way out on a limb there, hoping you understand that 1/4 is equal to 1/4. Now on that page, it gives you those 2 blue spots. You're supposed to fill in stuff. You can't just ignore what you don't want to do on a page. This right here for those of you that are following along. And that's what you write there. We don't write 1/2 and 1/4. We already have that. We're changing it so that we have equivalent denominators. Because as someone told me, I don't know, 6.5 seconds ago, you can't add fractions unless they have the same denominator. So now 1/4 plus 2/4 is what, Audrina?
3/4.
3/4. And I can check that because 1/2 plus 1/4 is the same as saying 2/4 plus 1/4. And now that I have the same denominator, I can add my numerators. So the correct answer to that would be 3/4. The second thing it asks us to do, so you've answered it. Record the simplest form. So you have 3/4. So Hillary has used 3/4 yards of fabric. And then question 1 at the bottom of that, describe how you would determine what fraction strips, all with the same denominator, you would use for 1/2 plus 1/3. Now I don't know, in my class of 23 of you, I had 68 of you tell me, I don't understand how I describe something. Well, if I asked you to describe how you make a peanut butter sandwich, you would tell me what you did to make the peanut butter sandwich, right? So where it says describe how you're going to solve 1/2 plus 1/3, stop falling on the ground. To describe how you would solve 1/2 and 1/3, well, that's the first thing I would do. I would put my 1/2 and my 1/3 underneath my 1. I mean, that's the first thing you did. Just like I would get the bread out of wherever the bread is, get the bread out. Then I would look to see which fraction pieces are going to fit exactly under 1/2. So it has to fit exactly under 1/2. And the same denominator has to fit exactly under 1/3. And so let's try maybe 1/3. 1/3 is not going to fit exactly under 1/2. So it's not that. Oh, we used 1/4 last time. Ooh, 1/4 fits exactly under 1/2. But does it fit exactly under 1/3? No. So it can't be that. So 4ths, 5ths. Do any 5ths fit exactly under 1/2? No, so that doesn't work. So let's try 6ths. Do any 6ths fit exactly under 1/2? And do they?
Yes.
Okay, so I have 1/2 equals 3/6. But I can only use that if 6ths will also fit exactly under 1/3. Because remember, I can't add them together if they don't have the same denominator. So I look and do these 6ths fit exactly, oh, for the love of Pete, exactly under 1/3. So how many 6ths fit exactly under 1/3? 2. So 1/2 is the same as saying 3/6, and 1/3 is the same as saying 2/6. So right now in my description, I probably have written, well, I'm going to put the pieces for 1/2 and 1/3 underneath the 1. I'm going to find fractions with the same common denominator that are going to fit exactly under the 1/2 and exactly under the 1/3. Piece of cake so far. So I have, here's my problem, 1/2 plus 1/3. But since I found a denominator of 6, because I found my fraction pieces that equal 6 fit exactly underneath there, and I'm going to change 1/2 into something over 6 because I can't add if they don't have the same denominator. And so 1/2 equals 3/6. I've proven that with my fraction pieces. 1/3 equals 2/6. I've proven that with my fraction pieces. And now I have the same denominator. So my description so far for number 1 that I know you've written down instead of leaving blank, which would make your teacher, whoever, he's kind of a jerk, so don't worry about it. But it may make him mad. You've written down, I'm going to take my fraction piece for 1/2 and 1/3, line them up under the number 1. I'm going to find pieces with the same denominator that will fit under 1/2 and also 1/3. And once I've done that, I know you didn't understand because you were writing on your desk the entire time I was going over this. So, Hey, you can watch the video later. Boom, because I made it for those that need to watch it later. I was going to say for those that don't pay attention the first time, they can watch it, but that would be rude, and I don't want to say that. So I'm just going. Anyway, I'm moving on. And so that I know 1/2 equals 3/6. Blake, I can add 3/6 plus 2/6 because I know I just add the numerators when I'm adding. So I have 3/6 plus 2/6 equals 5/6. Is 5/6 less than 1?
Yes.
Yes. And I could check that out to make sure 5/6 is less than 1 because I have that space there. My answer is less than 1. So we're golden as far as that goes. So you've described everything. Got my fraction pieces out. I lined the two numbers below 1/3 or 1/3 and 1/2 below my number 1. I found equivalent denominators, which made equivalent fractions like 1/2 equals 3/6 and like 1/3 equals 2/6. And then I added how many 6 there were together. Easy peasy, raw chicken squeezy. Alex.
The number one, I put 10/12. Could that work too?
10/12 could work. That's an awesome question. We're going to get back to simplifying fractions next week. Okay? But if you put 10/12, we're good for now. But we're going to talk about simplifying next week. You're one of those children who likes to work so far ahead. So amazing. And then the second question was basically, how was it different when you solved the first problem, 1/2 plus 1/4, than when you solved this problem, 1/2 plus 1/3? Y'all did both of them, so it should be really easy to explain how that is different. Oh, let's go. Now the next page, 196, that we are looking at to start today. It tells you what to do. Step 1, we have 3/5 and 1/2. I'm going to line that up. 3/5 plus 1/2. And I'm going to ask Lena, is the sum of 3/5 and 1/2 going to be less than, greater than, or equal to 1? Greater than. Good. Because here's 1. And if I put down 3/5 and then 1/2, I've got this space. It's going to be this much bigger than 1. That much bigger than 1. So it's going to give me, what do you call, what's a fraction that has a whole number and then a fraction part? Reagan, do you remember? A mixed number. Good. Mixed number. It's going to have a whole number and then a part. A whole number and then a part. So now, just like the instructions say on there, we have to find pieces that are going to fit exactly under here. So exactly under fifths and also exactly under halves that have the same exact denominator. And since I know many of you have already done it, only because I asked you to, I'm just saying. Tiago, what fraction pieces did you use that would fit under here exactly? Tenths. Okay, let us see. So good, 1/5 equals 2/10. So 2/5 equals 4/10. And 3/5 equals 5/10. So I have here 3/5 and 1/2. 3/5 plus 1/2. Okay, but I'm not done because I need to make sure that I can put a number of fifths below 1/2 also. So let me find my other tenths here. 1, 2, 3. Oh, here's a 4. There's got to be one more 1/10. Unless it got stealed or dropped, there should be one more 1/10. We're going to have to make do with what we've got because we had this first class. So we have our 1/10. And I need to see if I can make an exact number of tenths underneath a half. Can I take tenths and make it exactly the same size as a half? How many? 5 tenths. So my denominator of 10 is going to work. I already said 3/5 equals how many tenths?
Oh, 6.
6 tenths. So 3/5 equals 6 tenths. And 1/2 equaled how many tenths? 5 tenths. So now I have 6 tenths plus 5 tenths, which gives me 11 tenths. Which is what kind of fraction? 11 tenths is what kind of fraction? Bassett. 11 tenths is what kind of fraction? What's wrong with the fraction 11 tenths? Aiden, what's wrong with the fraction 11 tenths?
You can't do it because it's not 11 can't fit into 10.
We already said we had more than a whole, right? We ended up with more than one.
The numerator is
Okay? So we ended up with more than one. But what is 11 tenths called? Racking my brain. Bryce?
1 whole and 1 tenth.
Okay, it would be 1 whole and 1/10. Well, what's the specific name, Lamina, for...
1/2?
No, what kind of fraction is 11 tenths? Kira? Not a mixed number yet. Not yet. I'm going to make it a mixed number. Alex? It is an improper fraction. It's an improper fraction. And yes, you've done this in 4th grade. So don't stare at me like, improper? I don't even know what that word... Does it start with a U? No, you've done it. Don't be crazy. You've done it. An improper fraction is any fraction where the numerator is equal to or greater than the denominator. Equal to or greater than the denominator. It just is, that's why. It just is that way.
Wait, why
So
is-
we can't leave 11 tenths as it is. Yes.
Why is 10 tenths an improper fraction?
10 tenths is an improper fraction. Why? Because I can write it simpler. What would 10 tenths equal?
1 whole.
1. Anytime your numerator and denominator are the same, that equals 1. Okay, so now I have, and because I'm missing a tenth, and it's probably likely underneath the wall here since there's a 12-mile gap underneath the walls here. So it's either Miss Davis's room or somewhere crazy. Alright, so now we need, it would. Now I need to figure out how much more than 1 is this. Well, if I move that up here, and if I'm just doing my fraction pieces, I'm not doing the mathematical work. We're using the manipulatives first. We're using our manipulatives first. And now I know that 1/5 plus 1/2 equals 11 tenths, which is the same as saying 1 and 1/10. So all that work, you're going to end up with 1 and 1/10.
Yay.
Because 11 tenths is the exact same thing as saying 1 and 1/10. Because we saw 1/5 or 3/5 and 1/2 was 11 tenths. So I know this right here is 11 tenths. And how much greater than 1 is that? Is 1/10. So it should be 1 and 1/10. That's the way it be. That is the way it be. We'll continue practicing, and guess what? Tomorrow we get to start with subtraction using fraction pieces. Boom! Boom! Shakalaka, peace out, God bless, love you to some kind today. Subscribe and save the beast.